Hey, it's great to be back in Lake Kiowa. I was pointing out to Jennifer, she'd never seen the famous spot right there on the corner where I stood here on May 31st, I think it was, and turned about the color of my red shirt that I was wearing and asked for everybody's vote. And here, about 2.5 years ago. How time flies, and really it was the Lake Kiowa community that kept me in. I mean, I was only a few hundred votes of not making a runoff, and the community here really saw something in me, and I appreciate it, and then helped me get across the finish line on the runoff. But so it's always good to be back out here, and whether it's sometimes I'll make the Indian Creek Fire Department, and we've had the animal shelter, Noah's Ark out here, and some other events. I do always like coming back out and saying things, but and I spent a lot of time talking with Randy and Jack and Brent, and understanding sort of what's going on in the community sometimes, and making sure that Lake Kiowa is being represented, and that I'm up to speed with what's going on. Because so many times more is what are the local things that are being affected, that are driven by the state, that we can try to bring some saneness, common sense to do things that help. And a couple of things y'all might have overheard when we were talking about what can we do for the volunteer fire departments. Whether it's a local deal or sometimes it's from the state. One of the things we do as a state that last time we got rid of about 20-25% of is we've taken tax dollars from folks, and in the case of volunteer fire department, anybody who buys fireworks pays an extra tax, and we take that tax and we give it to the volunteer fire departments. But unfortunately for the last 10 some odd years, we've just used that to balance the budget in the state. We don't actually spend it on what we told you we were going to spend it on. So we hold it in the bank, and I believe that's absolutely wrong, and we've started unwinding that. We've got $90 million sitting in the state. I would like to see this next biennium budget coming up that we not necessarily undo all of it at once. I mean, if you give $90 million to volunteer fire, we're all going to buy new trucks and they're all going to run out at the same time. I'd rather split it over 2 cycles and be able to move to get rid of that. And so sort of that truth in taxation. Another issue is water. We were diving in, man, when you start looking into, the uniqueness of Texas water laws and agreements that are made, whether it's groundwater versus surface water, and what you can do, it gets really crazy and complicated sometimes. And then you get EPA and TCEQ involved, which are our quality standpoints. And then you get, which I like in Texas, is we've got a long-standing water tradition that we own the water that's below us. But, a lot of cities, they were big early. They may have had a little bit more foresight, and they went out and bought all the water rights in the state of Texas. And then so everybody sort of really is held hostage from there. And, we're trying to figure out what can we do with a little bit of the water that's used out of the lake to irrigate the golf course, and can we come up with a way where we can just buy that right so we don't have to spend, and I say we, it's really, this one's y'all, because it's Lake Kiowa citizens, and obviously that's a nice property owner. I know there may be a few people that live outside the gates that it doesn't affect, but the people inside the gates, y'all spend about $100,000 a year in electricity to replenish the water that's taken out from that standpoint. And we're questioning that. So we're trying to figure out a solution that makes sense and will help the community. A lot of times I find more pride and joy in getting those things done and being sort of that grease that keeps the state cogs going than I do as saying I passed 8 new bills this year, and boy, here's all the new regulations I lopped on top of you. I really don't think that's what anybody wanted me to go down there to do. We're gearing up for the 84th session. It starts on January 13th. This year, from a statewide, the big items are going to be, we think number 1 item is going to be transportation. We've got to come up with a solution on that. And then, as always, we've just got to pass a budget. I mean, really, that's the only thing we have to do is pass a balanced budget. We always do. By state law, we have to. If we don't have a balanced budget because we can't write debt, we come on back, we have to stay down there until we do. I'm very positive about the fact that we're going to have a good conservative budget. Will not break the spending cap. I think both our new governor-elect, the lieutenant governor, and the Speaker of the House have all got together, and all of them agree that we're not going to vote to break the spending cap. Now, I'd like to see that rein back in, be a little closer to population and inflation that we deal with, and we run government based on that. There's some other bills that'll come up on tax relief. One of the things and issues we have deals with rollback elections. Rollback elections, you know, at 8%, the county or any taxing entity can raise your tax, you know, can raise taxes, not yours, but the overall taxes that they collect, up to 8% before they have to come back to the voters. There's a new senator that's looking at a 4% rate. I think that has some merit. I've had to have some hard conversations with some county commissioners that don't like that because they want to be able to raise 8% a year without having to come back. And I said, you know, when you're going that much above population inflation growth, and in 21 of my counties I have no growth, I've actually have declining populations, that, you know, you've got to be able to go back and explain to the citizens, hey, here's what we're doing. We've heard you. You say we need one more sheriff's deputy. We're going to put that, but that's going to make the budget go up 9%. If the citizens want it, they're going to vote for it. Now, if you say, well, we want to go 9% because we want to build a new workout facility and a Taj Mahal, and we're going to go take, you know, to all these leadership training courses around the world, you'd say, no, we're not going to give you the money. And so that's why I like having to force them to come on back. To sort of skip back to transportation. So the biggest item that we've done, one, we passed here in Cook County and throughout the state about 80% approval rating on Proposition 1. That's taking half of the money that would have been going into the rainy day fund and uses it to build public roads. Not toll roads, public roads. Not supposed to be building rail systems to go to Houston. They're supposed to be building public roads that we'll drive on. We don't need lane expansion throughout my district, although I can argue maybe I-35 should be expanded right now because, you know, it feels like NASCAR. While we can do 75 on it, you are bumper to bumper doing that 75, but it is better than dead. But for the most part, what we want to do is we want to see, you know, good, safe roads to drive on. That means fixing the potholes, doing overlays. But on our FM roads, that's being able to put shoulders on them so they're safer for us to drive on, school buses to drive on, until we can go back and forth. So I talked to TxDOT an awful lot about being able to do that. I'm not in favor of raising the gas tax. In fact, I think we ought to take the nickel today that is going to education, because by the Constitution, we take 25% of our gas tax and we put it to education. But anybody in education will tell you, we do not fund schools based on how many miles everybody drives. It determines how much money we take out of GR. And so if we put all that money dedicated to roads, we would have a hole we'd have to fill for education. But education will get their funding first and foremost when we come down to being able to fund that. The other piece is we can take 100% or 50% of the sales tax. We'll get, hopefully we'll have, the conversation will be in that realm. But if I told you when you buy a new car or used car or truck, that all the money you spent on that tax went to pay for the roads you were going to drive on, you'd say that makes sense. And so I see that as a core function of government, making sure we have good roads to drive on. And so, you know, those would be where I push from that. I don't like the idea of tripling our registration fees. I consider a fee a tax, and it's just a unique way of sometimes being able to say, come on in.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Tough setup. They make you run the gauntlet to get in. So, but, you know, especially in rural Texas, so many of us have multiple vehicles, more than maybe somebody who lives in Houston, where, you know, a family has one car in their share because they're all close proximity and everything. Most people I know have, if they have 3 drivers in the house, they have 5 cars. You know, so you know, that's a bigger tax penalty in rural Texas than it is elsewhere. So, like the idea of sales tax from that aspect of being able to do that. We're going to talk about water again. We passed Prop 6 where we did the state water plan. We've got the bank now set up. The rules have just come out, and we've got to see how that starts rolling out. That doesn't make it rain though, and you know we need good Lord to bless us with rain to really be able to solve our drought problems. But we've got to figure out how to intelligently manage our water throughout the state. It benefits rural Texas what we pass more than it does the big cities. Dallas could already borrow money at the same rate the state of Texas can, but when I go to Rawls, Texas, right on the edge of Lubbock, which is part of my district, they've got a $3 million wastewater plant that they need to build. Being able to borrow at 2 percentage points less means by the time they pay that out, the ratepayers, because the people who buy the water in the city or who's going to pay that money back, saves $10 a month. That's real money savings by what we get. And so those are good things to be able to do from that. Education, always a big item in the state. Probably not as much emphasis on it this session as some people might think, and primarily because we're waiting on the lawsuit to come back from the judges and say, what do they think? The Supreme Court. We've had a judge in Austin who said it's unconstitutional because it's not adequate, but he won't tell us how much more money has to be in to make it adequate. It's not equitable, but he won't tell us how much more we've got to close the gap, because we did an awful lot last session to close the gap between our schools. And he says we have a de facto statewide property tax, and I probably might argue that he's probably pretty close to being right on that. I was on a special committee this summer, and we heard testimony from the superintendent of Deer Park ISD outside of Houston. He was talking about a $1 billion refinery that was getting tax abatement for 10 years they just built, but it was about to come on the books. And I said, well, you gotta be excited, you're gonna get all that tax dollars in the school. He goes, I won't get a dollar of it. He goes, I probably get more money now because they got the tax relief and they're sponsoring some scholarships or other things. And when the tax deals go on, they're gonna quit that giving it to us. He goes, so it's actually worse for us. So I would probably tend to agree with the judge from that standpoint. And we've got to figure out how we would end up fixing that. But that more than likely will be during a special session that will deal with that. I mentioned the interim. Besides my other two committees, Land and Resource Management, which deals primarily with eminent domain type of laws, and Ag and Livestock, which, the big issue, we actually had more issues here in the interim than we did during session, because we talked about feral hogs and what we can do to eradicate feral hogs. I was on economic development incentives. That would be the Texas Enterprise Fund, the Emerging Tech Fund, the movie industry funds. And we had some good comments about how those go and how they affect the state. The Enterprise Fund, it needs to be tweaked, it needs to be improved, we need to make sure we know what we're doing, but there is benefit of being able to have a fund that allows Texas to bring jobs in and when we're in very competitive situations. We brought Toyota in, $40 million, but they're gonna put 4,000 jobs in, $105,000 a job. I will argue that those people are not gonna go buy trailer houses in Plano, Texas. They're gonna go spend well over $250,000 per house, or over $1 billion buying property in Texas. They're gonna pay school taxes on it. It's gonna get washed through the state, and it will benefit rural Texas in being able to generate more money from that aspect than we're giving away. I'm glad that we didn't give the $1.2 billion to Tesla to build a battery plant here for about the same number of jobs, just because it was sexy and a cool industry. We've got to be smart with our money. But the biggest argument I made on that committee was, why is everything going to the Triangle? Dallas to San Antonio through Austin and Houston, where all the jobs and everything goes. There is other parts of the state like Gainesville and Lufkin and Lubbock and Eagle Pass, and we need to see how we can benefit the rest of the state. And so we're going to work on that. I've got a couple of bills drafted where we're going to try to eliminate the Emerging Tech Fund. I don't need to take money out of this room right here to give to a startup entrepreneur that can't get funding anywhere else for his idea. I just don't think that's good use of taxpayers' dollars. Whether he ends up being successful or not, that's just not what I would consider to be a core function of government. So we're going to work to see if we can bring this back. And Hollywood, we all might like movies or TVs. The fact that they sort of have their ball over here, and they say, well, if you don't give me money every year, I'm going to take my ball and leave. At least Toyota, we only gave them money once, and they're not going to leave. These guys, they threaten you every year if you don't give them more money that they're going to leave. And so I'm like, we're giving them more money than they generate in taxes, so I think that's absolutely wrong. If they want to go all live back in Hollywood, might help some of, Wendy might have lost by even more points than she. Exactly. And so, those are some of the things, that's what's going on in the interim. So as we get ready for session, we're working on some bills that do affect statewide, but also looking at local bills. We're talking about the fact that transportation in schools hasn't been changed since 1984. In 1984, the year before I graduated high school, I would probably venture to say the state was probably pretty close to half rural, half urban, or maybe 60% urban. We're now 85% urban. Well, I can take a school bus in Floyd County, and they be in Lockney, and they got about a fourth of a county, so they got 250 square miles they've got to cover. And they run 4 big bus routes on four deals. Well, if they go from 18 kids one year to 13 kids riding the bus, they get a huge cut in their transportation cost, but they get the same expense. So our rural schools are really fixed cost schools to operate, not only from the building, but obviously from a bus standpoint. In Dallas, they can consolidate, they can go from 200 bus routes to 199 bus routes, and nobody's on a bus any longer than they were before. So, working with Ken King at a Canadian, hopefully we'll be able to get that changed. Working with the volunteer fire department for a couple different deals. One, in the past, they've been able to do inspections, come into our schools, come into nursing homes, and be able to do that pro bono as a benefit to the community. A few sessions back, they passed a law that basically only paid firemen and that had a specialized training could do that, and it's costing our schools $1,000. Well, if I can say Calsburg $1,000, that's $1,000 they have more to do textbooks or to pay a teacher's bonuses or do something else. So trying to tweak back into that. One of the things the union's been doing, and man, I've got a lot of good friends that are on the paid fire service, and some of them had worked in Munster in the past and consider them to be friends, but the hierarchy of the union would rather see all the volunteers in the state go away, even though there's almost 80% of the firemen in the state are volunteers. Cook County could probably afford to have a few paid ones, but our response times would be just horrific, and if you went further out west, you would have counties that couldn't afford to have a paid one. They're trying to have us to be a certain level of certification day one before you can step on a truck. Anybody who has any knowledge of volunteers realizes that will not work. I make the choice of whether I step on the truck. I make the choice whether I've gone into burning buildings, of which I've done both multiple times. And I continue to train, but I don't train to do things that aren't important in Munster, Texas. So I don't do high-rise training, so I will not get my certification. Even though I have more hours in training than I need to be certified, I do my training for what I'm actually going to use. I'm not after a piece of paper that says I'm certified. So we're going to try to make sure that that is protected for rural Texas. Statewide, sort of got a couple, I've got actually 3 gun bills we're working on. One may be a little bit tough now. All of a sudden, when oil was $100 a barrel, it was really easy to say, we're going to have a whole bunch of tax dollars coming in. We're going to have more than we really could spend, so how do we give tax breaks? Well, one of the ideas was, let's give tax-free guns and ammo on the 3rd weekend in August, right before dove season, to celebrate our Second Amendment rights and, hey, to give our hunters an opportunity to be able to stock up for the season, save some money. That one may be a little bit tougher now to get through, depending on what the fiscal note, that means how much it's going to take away from the budget goes, and we've got to be able to look at our revenue stream on that. But the other 2 deal, I'm going to refile again my CHL Everywhere that eliminates all gun-free zones in the state on public properties. I'm not going to go after private properties, although I'm really torn, but if Starbucks doesn't want me to go have my gun there, I just don't shop at Starbucks from that perspective. So I'm not going to step over to their property rights, but when I go to a courthouse or when I go to a hospital or if I go to a school, I should be able to have that. We've got 18 years of history on that. Now, open carry, which is going to come up this session, will be a different part of that. It's a little bit tougher to say, even if I have my license, I should be able to open carry in front of a bunch of kids. Now, if I walk up and give a speech like this, most kids never knew I had a gun on me. And so it doesn't cause any odd things. I've got a friend who doesn't drink at all. He takes the 7 of the rest of us out because there are 4 other couples we travel and go out to dinner with. And if we go into a bar that's not allowed to carry, he has to leave his gun in the car. I don't think he should have to do that. He knows what the laws are as far as drinking while you're carrying your gun. So we're going to try to push that through again. That's a little bit of a sweeping. I think that probably more than likely the open carry has a much better chance of passing this session. It'll go from a 30-06 to a 30-07 sun, so there may be some places where you're able to carry if you carry conceal, but you wouldn't be able to carry openly. The other one I'm looking for is I didn't realize until an event happened during the interim that, when you go through a metal detector at the airport and you accidentally leave your gun on, you get arrested and charged with a felony. It costs you about $20,000 to get out of it, get your gun back, and not lose your license forever. I thought that was a federal law. Did not realize it was a state law. In the state of Georgia, they see that you have your concealed carry, because we already got laws. If you're carrying without your license, you're already in a lot of trouble. We don't need another one to get you on that one. But if you have your license, in Georgia, they just tell you to go back, put it in your car, go home, put it at the house. I think we ought to be able to do the same thing here in Texas. And in DFW Airport now, come on in. We're making you run the gauntlet. But in DFW now, half the people who are getting arrested are over 65 years old. As more seniors have taken the ability to go get their concealed carry permits, forget they have it in their purse, in their bag, and they're getting charged. And so, I'm not going to go there, Jeff. I'm not going to say about forgetfulness of any of those. So we're going to go through that piece of it as well, and we'll work on that. Budget-wise, I said we'll do a conservative budget on there. First time in history, we will probably spend more money. I think everybody's projecting pretty easily. Now we will spend more money on healthcare than we do in education for the first time in the history of the state. I think if you went back 15, 20 years, I can't remember exactly where it was something like 40% on education, 12% or something on healthcare. It was just phenomenal, the difference of those and how much it's grown. Because we're not like Washington, we don't have our own printing press. We don't spend a lot of stuff, and that's why I'm not asking to be on appropriations. Appropriations sort of works itself out. 88% of the state budget goes to education and healthcare. You factor in what we have to do for corrections, facilities, and everything else. There's just not a lot of extra fluff money that really goes around. From the state, we spend the fourth least of any of the 50 states, so we've got a fairly conservative budget already from that aspect. And so, we'll continue to work that through there. But, rather than me go on and on, I'd love to be able to take a few questions. Sir.
How about border security? Is that on the agenda?
Oh, absolutely. I'm working without my notes today. So. I appreciate you saying. Yeah, really number 3 and number 4 on the big items. And unfortunately, and I'm hoping it'd be nice to say it was only a one-time deal. But, we may be doing it for 4 years at least. Hopefully we get a new administration in Washington that understands that's their responsibility, not ours. We did a surge this summer. Governor Perry and Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst tried to get a letter talking about wanting to do border security. The speaker didn't sign on to it, and part of the reason was because they were wanting to do it in September. They wanted to announce it in April before the election, and they didn't want to do it till September. We wanted to push to start doing it immediately, and we ended up being able to do that. And so we did a surge with DPS going down there, and not only DPS, but our game wardens. So we've been taking a lot of folks out of Cook County, and Ray Sappington, and Barrett Brown, and a whole bunch of, all the other troopers that we have that are friends of mine. They've been all going down to the border. Our game warden, Darla Barr, is about to go down to the border, I think this month. She's due to go down there. What does that do? That takes resources out of here. We had the National Guard going down. National Guard 1 is doing a great job. They help out a bunch, and they were ready and easily accessible. The problem is they're expensive, and they have no arresting authority. We don't allow our military to be able to arrest inside the borders of the United States. So what are we looking at doing this next session? We are going to probably somewhere, and I've heard rough numbers, but roughly around 500 new DPS officers whose sole job is to work on border security. And that way we're not taking people out of Cook County to go down there and go down to the border and paying all that overtime. Be able to put them down there with the sole purpose of securing the border the best of our ability. I think we added 4,000 new cameras down there, and luckily they're only about $250 a piece. And so we're doing some in technology, some in manpower, have a dedicated force. One of the things I like about that dedicated force, they're talking about maybe 10% of them being sort of hot spots around the state. So if we have a problem in Gainesville because they're trafficking humans or drugs or whatever through Gainesville before it goes to Oklahoma, that part of that group would be able to come in and saturate and deal with that problem here, not just at what we see down at the border. And so making sure that we keep the whole entire state safe. So we're going to spend the money to make sure that we secure the border.
Is that why Strauss pulled the money and pulled the border?
No, I mean, we've got, we're committed through there, but that's where we're making the transition to. Now, some people, you know, we've had a special committee arguing over what the time frame is for the guard going in or out, and should they stay through the summer? Should they leave in February? Should they leave in March? They're working through the details on that right now.
Where's the lawsuit that Abbott?
That's recent, asking for our money back. You know, I think that was number 31, as he loves to say, is, you know, wake up in the morning and see the federal government go home. And so he's got number 31 is that one. And you know, we're going to try to get reimbursed for all that money. Whether the federal government will allow us and pay us and we win that case, it'll be tough. But I agree with them. It is the Fed's responsibility. We should be reimbursed. Yes, ma'am.
I'm new. I'm a new constituent. My name is Susan Schaub, and we've had.
Yeah, I left you a message. I'm glad you
Yes,
came,
did.
Susan.
But I decided to come here instead of talking to you privately because I think that what I have to say is more important, and I don't know that I by myself would be able to change your minds. But you've already announced you're voting for Joe Strauss for Speaker of the House to continue, and I'm upset about that. And I'd like to. And I'd like to hear more about why you think Scott Turner won't make a good speaker.
Sure, no problem. I mean, you know, there's been a lot of information floating around about that that has not been correct. One is they've talked about the fact we passed more Democratic bills than Republican bills. We passed 63% of the bills passed through the House last year were Republican bills. There's a group called Hard Hatter, and you get these websites and they sort of use crazy numbers and come up with things. If we use their same math and said how many Republican bills, so they say there's 53% of all the bills were Democrats. If I use their same math and say how many Republican bills were passed, you would probably, as a normal math person, you'd maybe say 47%. No, it'd be 78%. Because if a Democrat, so when I filed my bill that said the booster clubs don't have to collect sales tax when they sell a Dr. Pepper at the halftime of a football game. Synfronia Thompson, the senior most Democrat, signed on to my bill. Helped me make sure we got that bill passed. I think it's a good bill. Race Abington thinks it's a good bill. All of my 72 school districts think it's a good bill. This group counted that as a Democratic bill, not as a Republican bill. And so they're playing games with the deals. Why? Because they want to try to make they want to make us look bad for what we did in the 83rd. And I don't agree with that. Scott, great guy, personable guy, sat right next to me on the House floor. Wants to be conservative, but sometimes doesn't understand what we're voting on and whether that's conservative.
When we're looking at how people vote, you telling me that we don't see how they vote, what we're reading is a
Well,
lie?
you
Are you
can
saying
go-
that everything we read, we're following things now, okay,
Right.
Paying
mister?
attention.
We're following.
Mm-hmm.
We're not stupid anymore.
I
We
never-
follow how people vote now. I know
Sorry.
you voted against term limits, and I won't get past that. You will not get my vote again. But let me explain them to you. We are paying attention now. This blah, 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 blah is not working on people anymore, okay? I know your little crony stuff is going on.
And Scott,
Well,
Do you understand? We are reading, we're
Scott Turner
studying.
voted for one of the most liberal Democrat bills in Austin, and I had to explain to Scott, because he sat next to me, Scott, you do not want to be part of that. And Scott went up and changed his vote. You can go back to the books and look at those, because those are there. The Republican platform says that it ought to be voted on in caucus. Speaker Strauss would have well over 49 votes to win it. Speaker Strauss would have over 76 votes from Republicans to win it this time, because he lets the House lead the way the House wants to go. I was number 8 in the conservative rating. Scott was number 9. And here's the difference between what we were. A gentleman out of Southlake that everybody loves to be attacking, who probably was videoed first for saying this. He's number 5. Why? Because we are able to work
You'll
and get
have
our
to talk
things
over
through.
it.
Why do some
Don't
things
shut up.
fail when they come
That's how he
through?
does it.
It's because you don't work with the other representatives and explain what that bill is
Talk
through.
over it. See?
From that. So, those are, those are some of the reasons.
Well, they're not good enough to me. Joe Strauss was elected first as speaker by 65 Democrats and 11 Republicans.
That's
And that's how he got into speaker.
There's